Carl and I are old buddies from San Francisco. We did an event together last year. Let's see, so everyone remembers Ed, I'm sure. But Carl, why don't we just give you a moment to go ahead and introduce yourself real quick so we've got a level playing field here on our panel.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so my name is Carl Olofson. I'm a software industry analyst with IDC, which is an analyst firm that's actually based in Framingham, Massachusetts, not too far from here. And I've been an analyst for 20 years studying database software industry and all the various variations on database management, relational, non-relational, including NoSQL, Hadoop, all those things. Open source as well as the old-fashioned proprietary stuff. And I've been in the business for close to 40 years. As a developer, I used to be on a development database software development team at a company called Colonet Software, which no longer exists, although its assets belong to a company called CA Technologies, which you may have heard of. And I've worked on software modeling tools, and I've been product manager and a marketing product manager, which are subtly different things. And as I said, for the past 20 years, I've been doing analysis. I've also worked as a programmer consultant, so I've also actually sat, in the retail store IT departments and in, the various other types of, let's see what else. I mean, there was a computer manufacturing company. So
you've seen it all. Okay, we got it.
So I've basically seen a wide variety of problems. And interestingly, I just want to wrap up with this. Interestingly enough, although those experiences were quite some time ago, I find that the issues that a lot of those people face are still the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good. Let's dig into that. But first, I'd like to actually do a quick poll. So the question was gone, but I wanted to know, based on Santiago's whole discussion, that there's definitely this transition happening. How many of you have been through that transition in your organization of transitioning to a total holistic agile? So actually almost about a third, it looked like. That's actually really interesting.
I mean, it would be useful to know how many organizations started out. I mean, because there are a lot of younger companies represented here too, I think. Started out doing agile from the beginning. Yeah, okay.
Okay, interesting. All right, so let's talk about, so that means there's still about 2/3 that haven't gone through that transition. So let's talk a little bit about the obstacles. And Ed, you want to jump in there and talk about?
Sure. I think, so I'll speak a little bit for our company, but as I look at other companies, and I think you hit on it in your talk, I mean, I think one, when you get the management obstacles, the leadership obstacles, I mean, most of us, I was an old military guy, we kind of grew up in a command and control environment. And it's really hard to relinquish, that kind of decision-making hierarchy. I think that's part one, but I think maybe what really makes that harder is the lack of, the level of skills that I think most organizations have when teams are really empowered is pretty extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think, certainly companies that we deal with, and I even, reflect on EDB, have we designed in our staff capabilities kind of to operate in that way. And so I think there's some built-in obstacles that come in.
So I guess there's management obstacles. There's going to be, team and technical obstacles. Santiago, you want to comment a little bit on perhaps what are the management obstacles?
So there are a couple of major obstacles we see across the board from how do you manage your organization point of view. One is what I would call the kind of driving on the left syndrome, right? So as you guys know, on UK, they drive on the left. Don't ask me why, but they drive on the left. You're trying to get your organization to start driving on the right, like the rest of the civilized world. And kind of,
you're leaving out Australia, obviously. So.
And Singapore and India.
And Japan, but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, the majority of the rest of the civilized world. So how do you do that, right? So if you get kind of 50 people and tell them, start driving on the right, it's not going to work, right? So until everyone is driving on that side, there is tremendous friction. And you have teams that want to go fast and teams that want to cross all the T's and whatnot. And they claim that if you go that fast, kind of the heaven is going to fall and all of that. So you have this in-between state that is very complicated to manage, and you need to be very thoughtful on how to manage that. That I've seen quite a big challenge for many of our clients.
Yeah.
It strikes me there's one more question I want to ask to the audience. Do you find the ones that went through that transition, do you find that it was successful? Raise your hand if you think that the transition from how you'd been before to Agile had been successful. Raise your hand.
Maybe.
And how many thought it was not?
And
so interesting.
About how many think it's still an open question? They're not done yet.
So the same people. There we go. So let's talk about that. That this is, we sort of act like that this is it's something that's completed. Is it a continually ongoing transition, or is it something that there is a finish line and then you're starting to operate in this new world? Santiago, what do you think about that?
So it is definitely a transition, but the first few steps need to be deep and holistic, because we see many situations where I would call it agile by name only. Clients of us where they literally went into their HR system and they titled every project manager as a Scrum Master. And then they were hoping that things would change magically, right? Like, no, look, we have now 200 Scrum Masters, but those are the 200 project managers you had before. So you see a lot of that, right? You see a lot of embracing the terminology and, oh, we're doing huddles and we're doing this and we're doing that, but then it's all superficial. And in reality, it's just a thin veneer of kind of agile stuff on top of what they were doing before. So there is a transition, and you don't need to do it all, but the first few steps need to feel like, okay, we're making a big difference. Kind of things are different.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just gets a bad reputation and doesn't really work.
You know, I think that what we're describing is something where there is always going to be change and flux.
Yes.
You know, in other words, we're embracing change and flux instead of a fixed, because, you know, I mean, many of you probably remember when we all followed the waterfall methodology, we just assumed that we had an endpoint where everything was going to be just the way we want it to be. Then when we get there, we discover, okay, well, now we're 2 years out of date with what we need to do for the next step, and then we're chasing after that. So the answer is that we're always in a state of flux.
Yeah.
But that's not bad. And something that Ed said about command and control is that the old way of assessing accountability was that you had a manager who had managers who had managers, and there was this sort of chain of responsibility. But now in a collaborative environment, which is what Agile requires, you have to measure people differently. You basically measure people based on the contributions that the team has made that have worked out, you know, as opposed to saying to individuals, you know, your job is to make sure this happens. You know, now you have teams of people, they have to work with each other, they have to get things done. And of course you have schedules and deadlines and all the rest of that, but it's no longer this sort of hierarchical structure. And the hierarchical structure assumes that we all know what the endpoint is. We all know what the goal is. Once we reach the goal, then we can all go to Tahiti or something. That's not the way it works, you know? You're always changing.
Well, I do want to go to Tahiti, but...
It wasn't suggesting that that's a bad place to go. I was just saying, and anybody out there wants to go to Tahiti, please be my guest.
I'm not sure what side of the road they drive on, but perhaps you just stay on the beach. So Ed, I want to know, this is actually a little bit of a personal question, and you can completely deflect it if you want to. But as sort of an Army guy, as a CEO, how have you transitioned sort of the way that you were trained to be a CEO of a company for the 21st century?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, I think one, well, let me start with kind of this idea that, you know, those of us who served in the military, trained in the military, you know, there are rigid command and control structures, but there are actually a fair amount of collaboration, teamwork, and learning. In fact, the most important lessons I've ever learned about teamwork and about the power of collaboration, team solving problems was in those same units that had, you know, that kind of perception of command and control. And so, you know, even today, I think those are lessons that I borrow from in the way we, you know, build and run the company. You know, and it's and the core of it is a recognition of that the incredible power of collaboration as it relates to creativity and to getting results. I mean, I'll admit it's still hard not to have, you know, who's the ultimate accountable person.
Well, you are.
Well, you know, I have a tendency to kind of go there anyway, but I think, you know, that becomes just a natural challenge. But I think a big part of it is, you know, still a recognition about the competencies and capabilities of the team. And I do think that sometimes, you know, we're so busy designing our teams, you know, that are roles, you know, specific skill roles to solve specific parts of the, you know, the work problems that we have, that we don't necessarily spec those roles in the context of, you know, the kind of collaboration that Agile promotes. And I would say the other biggest obstacle, you know, for us is that, you know, these are the things, you know, when I was in the military, that we used to, as young soldiers, I mean, we studied leadership. We spent time on talking about what it meant to be leaders. So we developed leadership skills. In business, we don't spend any meaningful time studying Agile, and I shouldn't say any time, but not enough time in studying and thinking about Agile so that it's part of what everybody thinks of as their, you know, as our mode of operation.
Yeah, that's interesting, Carl.
Can I just mention one? It's not as exciting as some of the other things we talked about as far as obstacles are concerned, but it's an obstacle, especially for older companies who can't just sort of like drop everything and change into a new mode, which is bringing forward everything that you're doing so far. You don't want to lose any customers. You don't want to compromise any existing products or services. So there is that compatibility issue, which new companies don't have, right? New companies can just go out and say, you know, we're just blank slate. But for older companies, they can't do that. And also, and I imagine there's a fair number of DBAs in the room. You know, if you're developing a system in which there is some need to know what the data means, so you have schemas, you know. Total agility, which a lot of people use NoSQL databases for because they don't have schemas, then you have to, at some point, harvest what you know about how you've been using the data so that you can define it, or else you can't have meaningful, you know, sort of queries. You can't have meaningful data sharing. You know, so there is this tension always between the desire to have a clear definition of what the data means and this desire to go forward and experiment and create something new, and then let's see what happens next. You know, and I think that will always be there. And there's nothing wrong with that tension, by the way. That's normal.
Yeah. There's always going to be tension, and tension motivates us in a way. Santiago, I would like to know from you on the study that you've done and the work that you've been doing over the last few years, what has been most surprising to you?
So, so a few things, right? Number one, it's funny how in sectors, across almost every sector, there is this handful of organizations that really understand what is going to drive competition faster than the rest. And I'm not going to name specific companies, but almost you look at banking and there are 2 or 3 institutions that you feel these are the institutions that are going to do very well in the next few years. And those are the organizations that were very aggressive, embracing Agile, that really made the painful changes. I think we were talking before this session about bank in Europe that is doing that. And then there is quite a few where the status quo is so strong. Even when they try, when they finally get it, they just cannot change the status quo, right? I think it's hard to overestimate the strength of the status quo. Right? I had a client that used to tell me, look, when you're making a major transformation, you need to take the status quo by surprise, and you have 6 months to do a meaningful change. After that, the status quo reorganizes, they counterattacks, and the transformation is gone. Right? And that was a big surprise, right? Because even in institutions where leadership was convinced that they wanted to make the change and whatnot, yet the status quo was so incredibly hard to change.
So Santiago, could you speak to the role of regulation, because banking is a heavily regulated industry in that regard?
So regulation plays a role, a real role and a perceived role.
Okay.
Right? And the real role is, look, if you want to go to agile and you're in a regulated industry, which is almost every industry, you need to account for that. So for example, I have clients that the regulator doesn't feel comfortable with compliance being part of the squads, being part of the scrum teams. So they leave compliance alone, and they kind of arm's length, as in the past, the rest changes. So there's this real implications of being in a regulated industry, but then in addition to that, regulation is used as a massive excuse not to make a change.
Right.
It's like, no, we cannot do that because we are regulated. Why? Explain to me why, kind of what are the real impediments. And when you go a little bit deeper, the reality is that a company that decides to transform can still transform, even in banking, even in medical devices. I'm sure there must be some sector where it'll be so tough, but very few.
So what you're saying is you really just need to be a little more creative about how you continue to meet the reporting requirements and the risk management requirements and those things.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Even traditional media? I just say that as I used to be the president of a media organization, and I noticed on your graph that there was several on the upward swing, and then traditional media was in the corner as we didn't make it. And it's true. I think that change has really hit that industry very hard. Let's see. So I'd like to talk about different areas of your organization. So Ed, I know last night I spent a lot of time talking to Keith about how you guys are transitioning different aspects of the business and thinking about sort of different areas, how you're changing that from a technology perspective and then from a staffing perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we're like like many of you, as we look, part of what this event is really kind of grounded in, we've seen the landscape, particularly around data management and open source, change very quickly. And we're a relatively small player by comparison to the guys that dominate in the category. But and so on one hand, that size gives us the ability to be kind of nimble. But on the other hand, we also can't pay, we can't buy our way out of, buy our way in through change. And so we, part of that shift has been really looking at what's changing in the data landscape from, kind of this traditional legacy, this kind of legacy replacement into the world of new applications and, using technology and like Postgres in the world of new. And so we've had to really rethink, part of that's rethinking the messaging, because technology is largely the same regardless, but part of it's rethinking then, okay, so what are the design principles that we've been thinking about value add in Postgres around, and so priorities have had to change. So it's taken a kind of a market orientation, and then you look across that whole landscape of the whole operation and say, so what else has to change? How do we engage customers? And so, our kind of a mini version of agile in our world as it relates to how we engage is this, marketing and sales, like this complete integration of marketing and sales, so they're not like two things.
Right.
In fact, they're fully integrated whole, working on behalf of supporting customers. And so we've been pretty fluid, but it's hard to change. The market's moving fast. We're trying to keep up with what we see changing, and we got to rotate an organization. And we get we get stuck too in the same, what was it you said? What was the expression you used? The stuck in the power.
The status quo.
The status quo. Yeah. So we get
status quo.
Yeah.
When you said that, I was thinking that sounded like an Oracle license. Stuck in the same way. But we have our own version of that, and it's hard. And even in a small company, you have to get kind of everybody behind it. I think I spend probably most of my time, helping everyone understand like the context of change and why we're adapting. So people, there's a good answer to why.
So does that also involve defining the metrics for success? Because I go to a lot of conferences that involve open source, and a lot of people ask, so who's going to be the next Red Hat in the database world or something like that? And I keep saying there isn't going to be a next Red Hat. You're looking at this all wrong. Each of the context of each of these companies is different, and they have to identify their own metrics for success.
Yeah, it does. And in fact, we've, across the business defined pretty much all of those metrics. I mean, we have some that kind of stayed the same. But, when you start asking people to work together that hadn't worked together before, the metrics play a role in helping kind of crystallize and align. But we've had to make all kinds of tweaks and tunes to that. And some of it, it's hard for people to think about that kind of change.
Change is always scary to some people.
Yeah.
I think in one sense, it seems to be our only constant right now, is that
I think
things
that's
are going to
etched in
change.
stone somewhere.
No, it's true. And that, it's sort of disruption. We keep saying it so many times that seems to be just sort of what our current state is.
Well, it's the nature of life that it evolves, and it's the nature of living that we change. If we're not changing, then we're dead, basically. So change is a normal thing. And
right.
You just need to embrace it and figure out in what direction in some cases where you want it to take you, in other cases in which direction it's going to take you, whether you like it or not, and then just make the most of it.
Yeah, it's really just the speed of it. It's not that it happens. So at McKinsey, how are you advising your clients on this? And what are the words of wisdom that you give clients when they're afraid of change?
So obviously our clients are in very different places, so it's a little bit hard to generalize, but definitely we are reaching out to established organizations and getting them to understand the magnitude of the change. And then we are almost kind of one of the things we start the discussion with is asking them, what are you willing to give up? Mm-hmm. If you really think that you need to change, what are you willing to give up? Because
you can't do everything.
You cannot do everything, right? I saw a study that suggested that an organization, large organizations start something like 10 new initiatives per month, and they complete or stop 5.
Right.
Well, that's not going to work for a long time, right? People are going to be overwhelmed. So the idea of this is a change that you need to make sooner or later. You will need to take it seriously. The organization will need to give up things, and leadership will need to give up, because the role changes dramatically, right? And we tend to serve senior leaders of our clients. Kind of those folks have been working on a particular way of doing things for decades, in most cases. So for them, kind of as individuals, kind of what is the change, what the change means for you, what are the different things how will kind of your role will change. So we focus very much on that, on getting them to be a little bit more retrospective on what it means for the institution, what it means for the leadership of the institution before they start the change. Because if the worst thing they can do, honestly, is to do the change but don't do it holistically and deeply. Mm-hmm. If that's what's it, then they're better kind of work the way they used to.
Right. And we'll see how long they stay like they used to be. So I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience. And clearly, all of you are going through a change. So I've got one over here, but we'll start over here. Keith, go ahead first.
Hi, Santiago. I've really been fascinated by your research and two elements of it in particular. One is, as you describe how powerful having that agility is in terms of most business metrics, yet at the same time, how few companies really are at the mature adoption level. And as you described, it's very, very difficult to do, and you say to try to adopt it holistically. So it strikes me, given the nature of that change, that it's really hard, right? So do you see it sort of taking in the future, having this sort of viral growth where because it's so powerful, everyone's just going to have to do it, and over time, companies will overcome those barriers? Or do you think it's going to be, because it reminds me a lot like sort of the total quality movement in the 90s, where it's a hard thing to transform at that level? Or do you think it'll sort of reach an equilibrium point and then have a more gradual kind of growth after that?
We are seeing that change as we speak, right? 5 years ago, I would spend my life convincing clients that this was a change worth doing and that they needed to do agile and whatnot. I never do that anymore. I don't need to do that. So there is conviction already that this is the way to go, right? So at least that's there. I think there's still not full understanding of the magnitude and the depth that you need to reach on the change to get the, so I think that's the next stage. But we are starting to see that, and we are starting to see sectors where the level of commitment is more. So definitely the rate of adoption is accelerating dramatically. My sense is that a few years from now, 5, 6, 7, across some industries, not every industry, but across industries, there'll be companies that have adopted these and will be okay. And there'll be the companies that they struggle doing that, and it's going to be very difficult for them to embrace the rate of innovation that kind of you see these days, right? But I think answering your question, it is accelerating. There is a little bit of a viral effect going on as we speak. My sense is that this will unfold in the next 5 to 7 years.
Yeah, no question. I mean, there's stats that you look at that the companies on the S&P 500, that 50% of them will be gone from there in 10 years, where that transition used to be a lot longer. So it's interesting. So Marcy, do we have another one over here? Back there. And then there was another one over here.
So my question, I guess, is more for Santiago. I'm with MasterCard, and I lead an operational team, a database administration team. And I'd say we're about 2.5 on your 1, 2, 3, 4 scale. For tasks that lend themselves to waterfall, what has been your experience? What does it look like when it's fully agile transformed? So, server builds, you don't want to finish 80%, right? You have to do 100% of it. So that's where we're kind of transitioning with those more operationally focused teams, trying to get them to adopt a waterfall or transition from waterfall to agile. And I'd appreciate your thoughts on what that looks like.
So I think agile is going to look different based on the workload, based on what type of work are you doing. But there are many concepts of agile that you can adopt and embrace on things like server builds. Just to give you an example from a client of mine, where we looked at server builds, it would take, in their old way, 40-something steps would have, I think it was 22, 23 handoffs, and it would take weeks, if not months, to do server builds. And by the way, you would ask the people that were doing those server builds, and folks would only understand their small piece of the puzzle. Can you move that and create a cross-functional team that does the server build end-to-end, including the financial approvals, including the checks and balances? Absolutely, right? Is it going to be a Scrum-like of agile approach where you do maybe not, right? So there are going to be elements of the principles of agile for that particular activity that you cannot really embrace, right? But there are going to be many things that you will, right? Having an accountable team that does something end to end, having dedication. So and that's obviously an example, right? That I guess what I'm saying is, being agile is not white or black. You can take many of those concepts and apply them almost across the board for all types of activities. Will look different, the results will look slightly different, but nevertheless, it's quite applicable across. Did I answer your question?
Great. And then the question over here.
So yeah, my question's actually somewhat related to that, but more focused on microservices. So we've been working on the switch to Agile for maybe about a year, and we followed that model that you guys showed pretty closely. And so we've made quite a bit of progress, but like Carl said, it's always in flux. And so what I'm wondering is, how closely does that Agile method, in your opinion, have to be tied to microservices? We dove in and we did them kind of all at once, so like the big changes at the start. Have you seen anyone implement some of the Agile concepts before going to microservices? And does that make more sense in certain cases? In our case, we had about 15, 16 years of legacy code behind us, so it's taken quite a while.
Yeah, so happy to give you my perspective. So obviously, if your technology landscape is highly decoupled, modular components that communicate through clear APIs, whether it's microservices or not, but nevertheless, that helps tremendously. That helps tremendously because you can have a team and kind of the team can work on something and they're not conflicting with another 20 teams or whatnot. But the reality, particularly for large institutions, you never ever will get to a place where your entire technology landscape will look like that, right? I have multiple clients that have over 100 million lines of code running in mainframe. Good luck getting all of that into microservices. It will not happen, right? You can do some sort of encapsulation and whatnot. So I think you need to kind of start with what you have, put the right guarding rails to make sure that there is no chaos, understanding that in some cases you'll have multiple teams touching the same code base, which is what happens when you have kind of large kind of pieces of software that they are not modular enough, right? But that you can work through that. And then have a very thoughtful plan to identify where are the bottlenecks, where are the places where actually kind of you run into conflict all the time, and then invest on those kind of microservices, APIs, more modular designs and whatnot, and do that sequentially. Otherwise, it just take you forever. You'll never get to a place where you'll feel, okay, now we can move to Agile. But you do need to be thoughtful, right? And you need to say, okay, kind of given our current technology landscape, these are the places where these are going to be the bottlenecks. These are the areas of the software where we'll, and then work through that. And over time, improve them, get to a more modular space.
All right. We have time. We can if you're fast, we can probably do these two. So we'll go with
in your guys' opinion, as the industry changes and we're trying to find new talented individuals, what in your opinion has to change in the education world? Are we going to be looking more for traditional schooling still, or is it going to be more certification and self-taught base?
Great question.
Wow, that's
Carl?
Right. Well, I think one of the first things that has to happen is we need to motivate kids to go into technology more aggressively than we have been. A lot of kids are not, and so that ends up with a kind of talent shortage. I mean, I think I'm not a real big fan of coding schools. I think that they give you basic skills, but not the sense of how to do design. And I think in an agile world, you have to be part designer and part coder. You can't just be somebody who gets a spec and writes the code, because most companies outsource that work anyway. So what you really want to do is to get more kids involved in technology, in serious technology development in high school and college, get them on a technical track, and that requires a change in mindset in this country to say that that tech is cool in a sense.
Yeah, we could use more girls.
Well, exactly, and there's a movement called Girls Who Code.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm a big supporter of that.
Yeah, that's part of it. Absolutely.
Couple of additional thoughts. I think organizations that go to Agile intentionally try to blur the lines between different profiles, right? So they have fewer, so you need folks that are more rounded. And that has been going on in technology for decades, right? They used to be, these are the QA people, these are the developers. Now it's kind of typically in many organizations the same job family, and everyone is expected. That is happening at the scale including between technology and the business. So getting business folks that understand technology much more deeply and vice versa, very critical, but I think that will have implications in the school system, right? So just to give you an example, I have a client of mine where one of my clients is in service operations, and he says, look, I don't understand technology. And like, okay, so that's not going to work anymore, right? Service operations is going to become technology, right? It's going to be one and the same, right? So there are all these spaces. I think the change will be more difficult, by the way, for the business folks than for the technology folks, because the technology folks, maybe because I'm a technology guy, right? System thinkers will get it. I think for the business side, in certain areas, becoming technology savvy enough to to be successful in a digital everything world is going to be a bit of a challenge, and that will have implications. But my perspective, not.
Well, another aspect of answering your question is that within enterprises that have staff who are maybe working with older technologies, there needs to be motivation, incentives, training, and so forth to bring them up to speed. It's not just offering the training, it's not just HR posts something out there that says, hey, there's free training on this or that technology. It has to be backed up with a sense that this is something that is important to your future, and that needs to be embraced by everyone. And the attitude needs to be embraced by management in order to make it real.
Right, so there's education at sort of the K through 12 level, and then there's retraining in sort of people that are in the enterprise now.
Well, and at college level too. I mean, you need people who know how to do some of these designs. Agile design is not simple.
Right. Well, I'll just tell you one little thing that has been bouncing around the walls at MIT that we talk about on this topic is the concept of there being a time limit on your college education. And that just like, if you're a doctor and you have to recertify every 5 years, the idea that your MIT degree will expire if you don't go back on MITx and take some more courses.
Well, at least if it implies that there's a certain level of expertise, that expertise can expire.
And that's the point, that things are changing so fast that if you got a degree 25 years ago, when Agile didn't exist, that, it's an interesting point. So last question, no pressure, but make it a good one.
So I think some of the attractiveness of a waterfall methodology is that kind of set it and forget it mentality, right? You create the requirements, give it to IT, they come back in 6 months. So when shifting to Agile, I guess, how do you kind of encourage that buy-in across teams and kind of continue to build that collaborative and communication aspect of your enterprise?
So In a way, you get more of that when you go to Agile, because if you go into a cadence where the recipients of whatever you are developing, whether it's the business or customers or whatnot, literally see what you're creating every single week, and they see it evolving and whatnot, that creates much more buy-in over time. It obviously changes the engagement model quite dramatically, because kind of used to be a very intense period of engagement where you would define the requirements, that you would move into kind of forgetting about that for a year and a half or whatever, and then they would receive what they would receive. So the engagement is very different, but the buy-in definitely improves when they actually can see kind of things evolving, and actually they are part of the decision making for the direction of that software on a weekly basis.
All right. And I think we'll leave the food for thought there and move onwards to food, as well as, I hope, interesting discussions with your fellow attendees. And don't forget to walk through the expo. And as a reminder, you are going to go to your next sessions immediately following lunch. So for those of you that are interested in the business track and clearly need to learn more about technology, I'm kidding, come into this room. The community and the DBA are down on the first floor, and then that hands-on workshop is in what's called the East Tower, and there should be signs downstairs to direct you where to go. But now, enjoy lunch. Thank you. And thank you to my panel. You guys were great.